All right, it's about that time, YouTube. It's about that time. What's good? It's that boy Hyga back with some more blue Gunlancer stuff. Now, a lot of people have been asking me for my Ark Passive stuff, so I figured what better time than right now. So today I'm gonna go over some of my Ark Passive stuff. I don't really know what I'm gonna cover. I'm probably gonna rant a little bit. I don't really know if I don't have a script for this video, so I'm just kind of gonna go off the top. And if it's extensive, I'll probably trim it down in the editing. But if you have any questions, I will try my best to answer best I can. I've been playing Blue Gunlancer, for those who don't know, since February 8th, 2022, when the game launched. So I've played a little bit of red, but blue is really my thing. So it's what I enjoy. It's what I'm more comfortable with. It's what I've performed better with. And I have done every single raid upon release with Blue Gunlancer, from Volton, Vikis, Clown, Belshazzar, Kyangel, Akan, Ager, literally every single raid that has released, Echidna, Voldis, on Blue Gunlancer. Some of them I've tried on red, but I've done them all week one on Blue GL. So with Ark Passive, obviously a few things have changed with the game itself, right? We got the T skills, we got the Hyper Awakening, and Blue Gunlancer got some pretty significant changes with Ark Passive, right? Because before we were a ready attack class, basing all of our damage off of that 6-second buff that we got from Bash, and making sure that our rotation worked around that, right? We put the Bash skill up, throw the skills in after, and then once that disappeared, we were waiting for Bash to then come back up to then go into the second portion of our rotation. It was very fluid for maintaining adrenaline stacks. The damage was okay, but with Ark Passive, some things have changed, right? They've taken that 40% attack power, that 40% damage that we were getting from Bash, and incorporated that into our identity itself, which makes it much easier to maintain, and you don't have to worry about the Bash skill. You don't have to worry about having that up all the time, and you don't have to worry about, man, did my skill, right? Like if the boss moves and you have to reposition, you're taking a chunk out of that 6 seconds, right? 6 seconds is not a huge amount of time. So if you put that 6-second buff up, the boss moves or disappears and comes back, and then you try to use a skill, you don't have to worry about it not being within that 6-second window, right? Sometimes you try to fit something in and maybe it just ends, and then the second portion of your Guardian's Thunderbolt hits, or the second jump in your leap, right? Or the second hit of your big leap, right? There's so many different instances where you may not be getting the full value of that buff, right? With Vanguard's mindset, we don't have to worry about that. So I just did a few test runs, and I'm pretty sure this is going to be my setup for the relative future. I know with Belshazzar coming, whether that is later in December or in January, I don't really know what they're going to do. We're going to get a few more Enlightenment points, but it's still going to stay relatively the same. So this is the Enlightenment tree that I'm using for Blue Gunlancer. It is pretty much the same as most classes would do. You would just run all 92 of your points. This is with full ancient pieces all the way down to the bottom to get Vanguard's mindset. If you want to opt out for less ancient pieces, you can also go like this. If you have 82, which is I believe 2 ancient pieces, and 3 relic pieces, you would drop 10. So with 82, you can go just 1 here if you want. A lot of people want the forward space bar. If you want the extra crit rate, you can do that too. I don't have a script, and I'm going off the top. So if my calculations with how many ancient pieces and stuff are necessary is off, then I do apologize. But please feel free to look at Max Roll or any Nexus guides, anything like that, for a better breakdown of that. But if you were looking for 72, I know 72 is another, like, one of the thresholds or something like that. You can go into these 3 level 3, like if you were 1660, and you can go 1 into strategic move as well if you wanted the space bar, or strategy training if you wanted that as well. So some people have been asking me kind of like how they want to set things up with if you can get, how soon you can get Ark Passive set up on Blue Gunlancer. I did mine with 2 pieces, and with full relic accessories, you would be able to set this up, I do believe. So this would probably be the ideal setup. For the evolution tree, this is what we're rocking. We have spec, obviously 30 as high as we can go, and then the rest are in crit points. I have limit break level 3, which is evolution type damage. You can make arguments for illicit spell or keen sense, but in my experience, limit break is the most consistent for me and the one that I enjoy the most. If you really are against, like, you want 0 chance at mana issues, then illicit spell, obviously you get a good amount of damage on that. The reason I opt for limit break over that is because illicit spell does not affect your battlefield shield. Battlefield shield does not consume mana, therefore it does not receive the damage boost from illicit spell. So going limit break 3 versus illicit spell 2, it's basically 20% damage on all your skills, and then you use less mana, but not including battlefield shield, or 30% damage on all of your skills, including battlefield shield, right? So I'll take the evolution type damage on that. I also, with limit break 1, that's what I meant as far as 20%. It's 10% here, 10% here, or just 30% total. My fault. So I would rather just have the 30% in total, because that'll also apply to your awakening, right? Because with here, you should get 10 for your awakening, but here you get 30 for your awakening, right? So instead of 20, you're going up 30, you get an extra 10% damage on your awakening, on your battlefield shield, just extra damage, right? And I personally haven't had mana issues unless my support is like non-existent, or if they're not casting spells. Usually if you have a support with hands, as people like to say, you're not going to have an issue. I run Zealous Might, which is obviously for crit rate. I haven't really messed around with any of these other ones. I don't see the need to. The crit rate is where we want to go anyways, especially being a hallucination class. And then obviously Standing Striker. Standing Striker, you get immaculate value on blue Gunlancer because you just don't get knocked down. So there's no reason, there's no drawback on Standing Striker. So it's a very, very efficient way to allocate your points for the evolution tree. If you were looking for, if you were doing a run where you didn't have like a crit sin, or you were just like severely lacking crit rate or anything like that, you can also opt for Keen Sense 2 and then go limit break 1 if you wanted more crit rate. When I was testing with this, I had around 80% crit rate, versus with limit break 3, I have around 70% crit rate. So obviously the damage difference was not that big. I have a breakdown here. So with Keen Sense, over 3 minutes, I had 88.6. Limit break 3, I had 88.3. So it is very, very minimal difference as far as the overall damage output. It's only different by about 300, not even 300 mil, like 220 mil damage. So that's the difference in like one or two, like one Guardian Thunderbolt that doesn't crit versus one that does, right? So it is damn near the exact same damage. So yeah, if you don't have a crit sin, Keen Sense, probably more consistent. If you do have crit sins, limit break, probably gonna give you more damage. So that's how I have it set up for the Enlightenment and evolution tree. For leap tree, I pretty much just always have transcendent power for most of my classes, and then I have unleashed power for the T skill. I have seen some stuff on Loawa with like KR, they're using release potential, but I don't think that is gonna apply to us now, because I think that's when they add this second line. I really can't see how this would be more damage until we get this, because this increases the damage and then you'd be able to use your T skill more consistently. But my T skill hits dummy numbers. I don't know if I'll put clips up on the stream or on the screen, but you can check some of my videos. The numbers are, it's like over a bill usually. So very nice. If you wanted to though, again, if you're having mana issues, you can also take down a level on the T skill damage and opt for here, which increases your animation speed on your T skill and then reduces the mana cost, right? So there's a few things that you can do to kind of reduce mana issues. So that is for my Ark Passive tree and the build that I'm using there. And now I'll go over the skill build, which I haven't done in a long time. So for me, there are the runes, very, very subject to change. I kind of throw things in and out all the time. As far as the static ones, I'll go over those after, but right now I'm just going to focus on the skills themselves, because some of these are interchangeable as well. So for shield charge, this is pretty much the same as prior. It is 3-3-2. The second line is completely up to you. The second line literally affects your damage 0%. So if you want the shield while you're dashing, if you want a bigger AoE radius, if you want the movement speed, your call. That line, you can do whatever the hell you want. I opt for quick pace. You can do whatever you want. For the rune, Usually people run a purple gale wind. I have been doing some buses of Aegir and Echidna where there are stagger checks, so I opt for a vision, which still gives me that little increased casting speed. It's like a blue gale wind, but I also get the increased stagger damage like a mini overwhelm, so that's why I opt for vision. You can put a purple gale wind or legendary gale wind on that if you wanted to. For leap attack, I'm running 1-3-1. I have seen some people do 1-3-2. I've seen people on Loawa do 2-3-2. For me, I have always opted for, if low shock is viable, I'm gonna go for a low shock skill tree. I prefer low shock. I prefer the double leap as opposed to the bigger leap. When I'm in raids and I need to move or make adjustments, it is just feels much more fluid, allows me to be much more versatile and dodging or repositioning, right? It gives me a good opportunity to move to different places if I need to, right? If I need to cover distance, if the boss is moving, I just prefer to do that, right? The big leap, obviously you can travel far distances as well, but for me personally, I just prefer low shock. If you prefer the fat leap, that's fine too. I haven't messed with it as much, so for me, I'm using enhanced strike. Obviously we don't have to use quick prep anymore. Before it was 2-3-1. The reason you did that is because of how it tied into your rotation with the ready attack. But like I spoke on earlier, we don't need the ready attack anymore, so we can opt for more damage and grabbing the enhanced strike tripod. For that, I do not change the tripod. I keep a legendary gale wind on leap attack at all times because it is one of your slower animations. Now for shield shock, I rock 1-3-1. This one, I don't change the tripods either. Excuse me. I keep ready defense. It gives you internal like incoming DR pretty much all the time, which is great. Like, who doesn't want to just take 24.6% less damage? I know people always talk about how blue Gunlancer is so tanky, you can just tank everything. This plays a big role in all of that for me because ultimately you want to maintain your meter as much as you can, right? Yes, you can tank a lot. That does not mean your identity and your meter is infinite, right? We need to make sure that that is as sustainable as possible, and while that shield is up, you want to take as little damage as possible because you don't want to run out of your identity, especially coming out of a battlefield shield where you are very vulnerable, especially if your taunt is on cooldown and you don't have the ability to restore that meter. You want to make sure that you are taking as little damage to fulfill the meter that you do have. If you don't understand what I'm saying, when you go into battlefield shield, if you don't tank any damage for your team within this, you're going to come back with 10% of your meter. And if your taunt is on cooldown, if you have 10 seconds, you only have a little bit of shield left. You want to make sure that that stays as long as possible, right? And so having that little internal DR, if your support doesn't have DR at that moment, can give you an extra second or two of sustainability in there, right? So that's why I opt for ready defense. Quick prep is just the best option here. Really helpful for your adrenaline stacks, and then second turbulence gives you 2 casts. That is also why I run the legendary quick recharge on it. This is another one that I really do not change. If you really needed stagger, you could throw an overwhelm on there. I do not take off this quick recharge. It is your only skill that gets 2 casts. You can proc quick recharge on both of those casts, and quick recharge will apply to your battlefield shield cooldown. It'll apply to your T skill cooldown. So it'll apply to all of your cooldowns, right? Aside from your awakening. So having that up is key, right? You just want to use that as frequently as possible, and it does a good portion of damage. It's not a big part of your damage. It is usually less than 8 to 7% of my damage, usually in like the 5 to 6% range, depending on the raid and like scenarios. If you are going more mech to mech, it's going to be a smaller portion, but if it is a longer extended fight, you're going to get those higher percentages of the pie, like 7 to 8%. If you're going mech to mech, closer to like 5 to 6%. Next we have Shield Bash, which is going to be our synergy applier. That is going to be the defense shred, right? That's what we're taking on the first tree on hit foe defense minus 12% for 8 seconds. And for this, I have a poison rune on there. The poison or bleed are good just for that extra tick damage. In my experience, when I put the poison or the bleed on there, it can do over the course of a longer raid an extra 1 billion damage or 1.5 billion damage, which is just free extra damage. I will say I do not like how slow the animation is, but it doesn't bother me enough that I want to sub out 1 billion damage for a Gale Wind or a Vision Rune. If you are doing a raid where you may need extra stagger, if you are doing an Aegir, if you are doing a Echidna, if you are doing Thamine gate 1 and you need, or gate 2, right? When you have that times 72 mech, when you're hitting in all the orbs, if people are missing the orbs and you just want to be able to really help with that extra stagger, you 100% can throw an overwhelm, a vision, or something like that on shield bash. You can even probably throw a rage on there. This usually wherever you put the poison or the bleed is extremely interchangeable, but that is totally up to you. I opt for poison for that extra damage. This also could be like a purify if you wanted to as well, if you were opting for a purify. Nella, I'm going to come back to later. For the taunts, I'm running 131. This does not change. No matter what, you're always going to keep the MP reduction. I always keep the shield. You could run lingering taunts. Lingering taunt, if you don't know, does not increase the duration that your synergy is applied, but it increases essentially how long you have aggro from the boss. So it's not going to work in most scenarios, right? Aegir gate 1 and 2 you cannot taunt anyways. Echidna gate 2 you cannot taunt. Thamine, majority of gate 2 you can't taunt, and gate 3 you can't taunt. So for most scenarios this is not going to get as much value, but if you are doing a raid where it can get value, especially in like hell mode, you can see certain scenarios where people are going to opt in for the taunt duration. But for me, most of the time I'm just rocking the shield. Really helps you stay a bit more tanky in key moments. Open weakness is obviously your synergy that does not move. You want to leave it on that at all times. Now for dash upper fire, before there are different scenarios in which you could take this off, but now you would literally only take this off if there is 0 counter, 0% chance of a counter in the raid, which is not most of them, right? Aegir has counters in both gates, Echidna has counters in both gates, and Thamine has counters in all 3 gates, right? So I don't really see where you would take this off anymore. So for me, I put just enough points into it, pretty much what I have left from the rest of these, and I just get it quick prep and weak point detection. It doesn't do that much damage, but it does more. I don't feel like wide hit really makes that much of a difference. And if you wanted to, you could also opt for excellent mobility, which just gives you a bit more distance to cover if you want to be able to counter from further away. So totally. Am I tripping, or is that shorter after you spacebar? Feels shorter after you spacebar. I don't know, maybe it's a placebo effect. But I usually opt for quick prep just so I can have it up sooner and make sure I have that in the pocket. You can also put a legendary overwhelm on this for stagger checks. If you have extra points to spread around and you get this to level 10, you can put extra shell for additional stagger as well. Also, extra shell makes it so you get 2 hits, and all 3 of the hits, 1, 2, 3, all 3 of those count as a counter. So if you go in early and only the 2nd or 3rd hit count or hit the counter, they will still counter, if that makes sense. I really hope that makes sense. It makes sense in my head. So counter, counter, counter. Those all 3 count as a counter. So, but I don't have enough points to get there. So, I just stay with quick prep and weak point detection. You also could use the attack speed if you wanted to. This one is pretty interchangeable. Do what you want with that one, whatever feels best for you. And then for Guardian's Thunderbolt, this is our main damage skill, our highest damage skill. We want to land this as consistently as we can. 3, 2, 1. It's been the same tripods since the Regulus created Arcasia. Like it doesn't change. Legendary Galewind on here. If you want to put purple Galewind and put the legendary on shield charge, you can do that as well. Otherwise, I'd leave Galewind on this. I mean, if you were like in a stagger build, you could probably put an overwhelm on it because its animation is relatively quick, but I usually leave the Galewind on there. Now coming back to Nella, or this slot, obviously there's some people who have seen Korean Gunlancers, may have seen me in my Aegir video using Surge Cannon or Charge Stinger. This slot is up to you. I'm going to be 100% honest. I have tried Charge Stinger, I have tried Surge Cannon, and I have tried Nella. The damage difference with Surge Cannon and Charge Stinger is not enough to where it's like, oh no, I'm definitely dropping Nella. When I use Surge Cannon in my build, it usually does like an extra 3% of my damage, which when you're doing consistent damage, it even feels awkward trying to fit it in there. It doesn't fit into your rotation very smoothly. With the old rotation, there was a little bit of downtime, so you could argue for having a good opportunity to get Surge Cannon off or get Charge Singer off. But it does do a little bit of extra damage, and it's also great for stagger checks. So like I said, I've done buses and Aegir runs where there are stagger checks, so Surge Cannon is definitely going to get me more value in those cases. However, if you can get value from Nella in any ways, I would just recommend Nella. It is better in most cases if there's stagger checks, or if you just want to do a little bit extra damage, you definitely can use Charge Singer or Surge Cannon. Surge Cannon and Charge Singer play a similar role to Shield Shock. If you remember earlier, I said Shield Shock, the longer the raid, the bigger part of the pie it's going to be of your damage. The shorter, or like the more mech to mech you're going to go, the smaller the portion. Surge Cannon and Charge Singer are the opposite. The more mech to mech you're going to go, the bigger percentage of the pie it's going to get, right? Leaning towards like the 6 to 7% of your damage. Whereas the longer the fight, the smaller the portion it's going to consume. So if there is anywhere that you can get value from Nella, though, whether it is purifies, right? In like Echidna, Gate 2, you can purify a lot of different things. In Aegir, purifies can come super, super handy for both gates. So I would usually just opt for Nella if you were curious on what to use. But use what you want. That is my skills for the engravings. I am using Grudge, Barricade, Adrenaline, Cursed All, Keen Blunts. The Spirit Absorption and Max MP are just for Trixion. And these are also somewhat changeable. The only thing that I would change is Barricade for Stabilized Status. Now, Barricade for Stabilized Status is also personal preference. There's MP efficiency that you could also use now. I would not use this for the same reason I would not use Illicit, because it does not apply to my Battlefield Shield. Battlefield Shield is a pretty small percentage of your damage now. Prior to Ark Passive, it was closer to like 8% or 7% of my damage, but now it is closer to like 2 to 3% of my damage. Regardless, I don't want to sub damage off of it if it's optional, right? If it's optional, I want to put as much damage into it as I can, because there's no reason not to. Barricade does not apply to Battlefield Shield. So if I give myself full meter and I use Battlefield Shield, we'll summon a boss real quick just so you can see it. There's a landing hit and there's an explosion hit, right? So there's the first little hit, that's the small one. But when it blows up, I don't have a... Where did that come from? Was that my pet? Wait. Did they change that? No, they definitely did it. That was definitely my pet. That was definitely my pet. So yeah, when it explodes, your shield goes away. So Barricade does not apply to that. Unless you use Nella on yourself prior, or if there is a support that has a shield on you, the Barricade engraving, you're getting 16% damage on every other skill. You're not getting 16% damage on Battlefield Shield. Stabilized Status, so long as you are above 65% HP, it'll apply to all of your skills. Right, so if you like using Stabilized Status, then you're gonna get great value here. I opt for Barricade because I was using Stabilized Status, and between Atros and buses and being low HP, not potting and all that stuff, I don't look at my HP. And until this game does something that makes it easier to identify if I am within that Stabilized Status threshold, right? Like if there was like a glow on my character that disappeared, that made it very obvious or something, as opposed to having to look right above my HP bar to see if I see the little yellow character, like dog, I'd be having like 16 buffs. We got all these different people in the raid. I can't see, I'm not looking for this little yellow woman in the middle of a raid. So that's why I don't use it. But you definitely could if you want to. As far as the other ones, you could also drop like Keen Blunt if you wanted to for Stabilized Status. Probably wouldn't do that. You have a good amount of crit rate, there's no reason not to. With these Evo pieces, like I said, I have 70% crit rate by myself. That's good enough to get value out of Keen Blunt. So don't really see why you wouldn't. So that is my engraving setup for that. I went over the combat stats, spec crit, went over the skills. As far as the awakening goes, the awakening, that's up to you. I use this one usually for damage, extra crit rate when you use it. But there are definitely arguments to be made for the Defense Awakening. There are plenty of places where you can get insane value on it. So it just differs raid to raid on what Awakening you'll be using. And I think that is it. I believe I went over everything in my build. If I didn't go over everything, all right, we can edit this in. We can edit this in. I forgot gems. I forgot gems. Okay. So I'm using the Trixion ones now, but this is the gem setup that I use. This is 5 damage gems. We have 1 for shield charge, shield shock, Guardian's Thunderbolt, shield bash, and leap attack. And for the cooldowns, I run leap attack, shield shock, shout of hatred, shield charge, shield bash, Guardian's Thunderbolt. So I'm pretty much just damage cooldown on all of your main skills. Damage cooldown, damage cooldown, damage cooldown, damage cooldown, and then a cooldown on taunt. If you were looking for room to move anywhere, the first place I would recommend looking if you were looking to move would be the cooldown on shield shock. You can sub that out if you wanted to. I opt for it because it just feels more fluid in the rotation. But if you were looking to put a gem on, like, say, Surge Cannon or Battlefield Shield or Charge Singer or Nella or something like that, this is the first place I would look. I would look at Shield Shock. Otherwise, kind of feel like they're all static. Maybe Taunt if you want. I really wouldn't recommend that, but maybe Shield Charge cooldown. I would probably go shield charge cooldown next over taunt, but again, I think those should stay. So totally do what you want, but if you were looking to move shield shot cooldown, that can kind of move. That's not the end of the world. The rest of them, I would definitely recommend leaving in play, but totally up to you if you wanted to move any of the gems around. So damage cooldown on your 5 main damage skills, and then a cooldown for your taunt, which you want as much uptime as you can because it gives you your meter, applies your head attack and back attack synergy, and is also a taunt for bosses. So I don't really see why you wouldn't want that. But yeah, I'll throw this in there at the end. Maybe I can go over rotation, but the rotation is pretty, I don't know, it's not as organized as it once was. So it's feels a little sloppy, but you still want to open with your taunts, put your shield up into bash. With the forward spacebar strategic moving, you can animation cancel things just to make the follow-up animation a bit faster. So I can shield shock spacebar into shield bash, and it just makes the connecting the 2 skills a bit smoother. But you're pretty much just kind of spamming everything on cooldown, and making sure that your synergy is up. You can battlefield shield when it's up, but this is what I mean by like battlefield shielding when your taunt is on cooldown, right? It's gonna pop. I have 8 seconds left, so I need to stay with this amount of meter until my taunt comes off cooldown. And the reason that is so important now is because, remember, before I could taunt or I could use battlefield shield, be low on meter, and then I could use like bash and shield bash to get a little bit of meter back. And then this would be what I was working with, right? That's a bit more healthy. However, we don't have bash now, 1, and 2, all of our damage is within our identity bubble, right? Part of the Ark passive change was putting our damage into the shield, right? That's where we get the 42% extra damage. So we do not want to do any damage without our shield up. We do not want to do any damage without being in defensive stance, even if it's just one of those. You're missing 42% damage on your shield bash just to get a little bit of extra meter, which is why battlefield shield is a bit more frustrating to use now. And you have to be a bit more particular when you use it, right? Sometimes you have to put value over your own setup and just use it when it's a great opportunity to, right? 4 mirrors on Echidna, or like tunnels in Echidna gate, or Aegir gate 1, or when people are about to fall off in Aegir gate 2, right? Like you can still get a crazy amount of value on the utility side of things, but you just have to be careful with your own identity and making sure that you can still maintain your shield meter, because all of your damage comes from being within the shield. Much easier than bash, but for those cases when you battlefield shield and when you run out of meter, you have to be very careful because you are missing a lot of damage when doing that. But yeah, taunt, shield bash, deep attack, spacebar, you know, guardian thunderball, and you're pretty much just using your big skills as much as you can. If it's optional, you want to make sure you T-skill when your taunt synergy is up, and you want to T-skill the head as much as you can, because your shield dash is a frontal attack, and if you don't know, when you frontal attack on skills that have the frontal attack like direction thing, you get 20% extra damage from hitting a frontal attack. 10% extra stagger, 20% extra damage. It might be vice versa, but it's one of those. You get extra damage, period, from hitting a frontal attack skill on the head. So if it's optional, you want to hit your T skill on the head. Not the end of the world if you don't, though. So otherwise, that's pretty much it. If I didn't cover anything that you wanted me to cover, feel free to ask in the comments, and I will do my best to answer any questions. This upcoming weekend, I believe we should have some more content for you with a different creator. So once that is out, I will hopefully link that in the description. And yeah, like I said, if you have any questions, let me know. Hope this is helpful for everyone, and I will see you guys next time.